So for those of you who don't know, here's the drive modes that I'm referring to. See, the kind of standard on the R8 is obviously start button. Then the drive select, you can go through auto, dynamic, which is more aggressive, individual, you could do a setting, and comfort. So again, it's like comfort, automatic it's kind of like the computer controls everything. Dynamic is a more aggressive setting. And then individual, you can set the different details. And then there's performance mode, which is this button here. So the plus and then the performance gave you this button for performance mode, which is everything aggressive. Also sport exhaust button. So if you have the sport exhaust, it gave you the ability to control when the valves open and close. So right now in performance mode, the valves are in sport or standard. So there's sport and standard for the exhaust button. The exhaust in performance mode is in sport by default. And if I just clicked it, it went to standard. So right now it's in sport, now it's in standard. And the big difference is when it's in sport, the valves are open even at idle. So you can hear that the valves are open. And what'll happen is as you start driving, as soon as you get up to, I don't know, 10 miles an hour or so, the valves will close and then they'll open again at 3,500. So it can be good or bad. You know, now if you go to standard, you hear outside the car, the valves are closed, which personally I like because then you're just going from closed, and then 5,500 is when they would open. So it's a bit more linear and smooth versus open. You start driving, they go closed, and then 3,500, they're back open again. So if you're in like, you know, if I'm aggressive driving mode feeling, then yeah, I do drive with the sport exhaust button in sport. But most of the time I'm driving in standard. And the reason is, I talked about it in another video, the QuickSilver exhaust that I have is very loud, very aggressive. And in my opinion, it sounds best when you cross from about 5,000 RPM. So in other words, I drive in dynamic mode with the sport exhaust button in standard. And then that means that the valves are closed to about 5,000 RPM, and then they open above that. And that's, to me, like the sweet spot for the QuickSilver, because inside the cabin, it's a very clean sound with the valves closed, but still very, very loud with very exotic tones. And then once you get over 5,000, the clean sound in the cabin continues, and you hear motor and exhaust. And so it has like the perfect blended balance. The QuickSilver with the valves wide open the whole time, there's just a lot of cabin noise that isn't good cabin noise. It's just loud resonance. And even at 3,500, it's a little early. Now, if you're like getting on it and you're revving and flooring the car, then it doesn't really matter because you're breaking through 3,500 to 5,000 so fast anyway, to be honest. But for most driving around town or just cruising, you know, again, like the sweet spot for the QuickSilver is probably to have the valves open once you hit between 4,000 and 5,000, because again, then you get that perfect transition. And even the transition is very natural. It doesn't go super quiet to loud. Like with the stock sport exhaust that I had, drove me nuts. And I have another video on it, you can watch it, where like with the valves closed in the stock sport system on the 22, it's like whisper quiet and then loud. So it goes from quiet to loud, quiet to loud. The QuickSilver is awesome with the factory setup, because even with the valves closed, it's still loud enough that you're getting some really good exhaust sounds And then once you get over 5,000, obviously that means you're probably driving the car hard anyway. And then it goes from like sounding really good, great sound, to like escalation, turning the volume up, like turning the volume knob up higher, which is exactly what you want when you start getting in the higher rev range. So that's a quick overview. Again, this is a 22 with the performance package, which gives you performance mode, which is an additional mode, sport exhaust button. I have the QuickSilver exhaust. And for those of you who are looking at R8s, trying to figure out the exhaust options, modes, and everything else, it can certainly be overwhelming trying to read up and figure it all out. You have to invest a lot of time into it, so hopefully this helps to shortcut some of that. And I'll try making some in-the-car videos with, you know, the sport exhaust button on and off, again down here, in dynamic mode in particular, because for me, I drive in dynamic mode, in dynamic manual mode 99% of the time, in the factory mode, and then I kind of play around depending on the mood I'm in with the sport exhaust button on or off. Last thing I'll say is with the sport button for exhaust on, you do get more exhaust pops, crackles, certainly like around 4,000 RPM. And if you have it on standard, you get less crackles, and they really don't come into about 5,000. So the good or the bad, if this is a headache for you, maybe you kind of go with the earlier model R8. I personally, now that I've figured out all the settings, I love having all the different configurations because it gives me a ton of options. And I'm going to make another quick video here in a second of the CETE, the valve controller, and how that works. All right, so I just did a video talking about the factory setup with the QuickSilver exhaust on a 2022 with the performance package. You know, it gives you the different drive modes: dynamic, individual, comfort, etc. And then this also gives you performance mode, which is an additional mode, just a little more aggressive settings. And so I added an additional controller. So here's how I know when it's turned on. The CETE, you click on traction control, you turn that off, then you hit it one more time. And see now, not sure if you can hear, but you hear the exhaust, the flaps are open at idle. And what's gonna happen is the exhaust flaps will stay open full time, no matter what. And like right now, I'm going between sport and standard on the exhaust button, and it doesn't change anything because the CETE locked the valves open at no matter what. Whereas on the OEM setting, the valves are never locked open full time. And so the reason you have the CETE is if you want to keep the valves open full time, boom, in dynamic or performance, they're going to be locked open no matter what. The other benefit is in comfort mode, it locks the valves closed. So on cold start, which is really nice, I'll actually use the CETE in the morning for cold start. And then once I get driving, I'll actually turn it off. And how I know that it's off is that I'll kind of play around with going to standard. The CETE, the downside of it, now the CETE valve controller is off, which means I'm in like factory OEM mode. And the reason I know is when I go to sport in the exhaust, standard is quiet or closed and sport is open. That's like the default OEM mode. So again, if I flip over here, you can hear the flaps are open. Now you hear it get quieter because they're closed. And that's going between dynamic mode with the valves open and closed. So that's what the CETE does. And you know, it works really good. There's a little bit of guesswork because you push the stability control button and then you got to hit it and then hit it again, but there's no, it's not like there's a light on the dashboard or any notification to you, like a beep or something that it's on or off. Kind of have to figure it out. The way, so the CETE works great with without an aftermarket exhaust, because if you have like a performance model and you want to be able to lock the valves open, then it works really good, because the sport exhaust sounds really good when the valves are open, but the default for like the 22 keeps them closed until like, I don't know, 3,500 RPM. I have a video on it, and it goes from like loud to quiet, loud to quiet. Anyway, the CETE will give you the ability to lock them open, and that's really a sweet spot. So I know a few people who are not adding an aftermarket exhaust, but keeping the stock sport exhaust. The CETE does a great job of allowing you to keep that open. I don't have any affiliation with CETE. I don't make any money off it or anything like that. Just kind of sharing my thoughts. And I know there's so many videos and a lot of confusion. Hopefully, you know, kind of talking through these various items with exhaust modes and settings and all this stuff. If you have the performance package and are considering aftermarket exhaust, then hopefully that helps.